Hey trappers, Dale Billingsley here, Billingsley Brand Lures. So guys, what I had planned for a video today, I can't do because it's just entirely too windy. Hopefully we can do it tomorrow. But what I want to talk to you about today is some of the finer details and points to building snares and cable restraints, okay? We're going to go over different sizes of cable, why we use different sizes, the damage caused by different sizes as far as the snare mark on the fur. We'll go over some of the pieces and parts, the terminal ends that you need as far as difference in locks and this, that, and the other. And let's just jump right off into this and get fired up here and get started. All right, guys. So some of the things you're going to need to have here. I mean, this stuff is pretty important. You're going to need to get some single ferrules. These are an aluminum. These are an aluminum ferrule. They've got a hole in the end of them, and these go on the ends of your cables. And you can get them for whatever size cable you use. Now, this happens to be a 3/32 single ferrule. And then you're going to need some double ferrules. And those go on connecting swivels and making loops on the end of your cables. And also you can use them for attaching your locks to. Then the next thing you're going to need is some way to support that snare. Now you can buy these are called a whammy, and there's a couple different styles of them. This just happens to be one of the styles that they use. You can buy these just easy enough, or you can make your own, which is what I prefer to do. I prefer to make mine out of a piece of tubing. Just cut them about 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch long, and I think for the size that I run, I think these are 1/4 inch inside diameter, if I remember right. I'll try to get the specs on that and give that all to you. And this is a good point right here where you might want to go get yourself a pencil and a piece of paper so you can take some notes. It's entirely up to you. The next thing you're going to need is some kind of swivels. Here is a number 9 swivel that a 1/2 inch stake can go through. You can use these. I prefer to use these, but these are getting really hard to come by now. It appears that I know I told y'all a few videos ago that I could get these, but it appears that the company has stopped making these. These are a 600-pound test Roscoe crane swivel. I'm on the hunt right now trying to find another outlet for them. Right now it's been to no avail, but hopefully soon I can stumble onto somebody that does have them. These are what I prefer to use for an inline swivel connecting my 2 different size cables. I run 2 different cables, and I'll explain that here in just a bit. The next thing you're going to need is some lock of some kind. Now, if you live in a state that requires a 1-piece lock for like a cable restraint, there are several different kinds on the market. These are just a couple that I happen to have here. There's the bent washer, and then there's this is the micro lock. I prefer, if I have to use them, I prefer the micro lock over the bent washer any day. That's just my personal preference. You need to fool around and do some testing on your own to see which ones you like the best. And when I can use them, states that allow them, my favorite lock are the cam locks. Now this happens to be a nickel-plated, just a regular cam. This is the mini Black Dog cam without the teeth. Now you can get them with teeth filed in here. I don't like them myself, but maybe something that you want to look into to see if you like them or not. So that would be that's about all there is to it as far as the terminal ends of a snare. And you can get yourself a toolbox or some something to keep your pieces and parts and your components in, to keep it handy for you. Okay, now before we get started any further, let's take a look at some cables and I'll explain to you the why I use the ones that I use and why I prefer them over the others. Alright gang, so this cable here on this roll is a 7x7 3/32 cable. Now 7x7, what that means is if you were to unravel this cable, you'll see that there are 7 strands twisted together to make one strand, and then those 7 strands are twisted together to make the big strand that you see here in my hand. 7x7. Okay, now this is a really soft, really forgiving kind of cable, but it is also very vulnerable to being chewed on, especially by coyotes. Coyotes will chew this in two. Not so bad on the 3/32 7x7 as they are on the 5/64 7x7. So you want to make, kind of use your own judgment there. What I use this for is the tails of my snares. Okay, these are cut for the tails. And we'll get into that here in just a minute. But anyway, this is the one I prefer. I know some of you states like Pennsylvania, and I think possibly Missouri as well. You guys can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think this is the size of cable you have to run for the whole snare. Not only the tail end, but for the loop too. And for that, I apologize and I feel sorry for y'all, because this cable does cause some burning on the fur. It does leave a terrible bad mark on the leather. When you go to scrape that fur, you'll be able to see it. But make sure when it comes to snares, cable restraints, make sure that you read up on the laws in your state and you follow those laws to the letter. Okay, don't try to fudge, don't try to mess around, because you're just going to get caught, and cost y'all a bunch of money, and possibly help to losing your rights to be able to run cable restraints or snares in your state, and you sure don't want to be responsible for that. So anyway, 7x7 3/32 cable. This is what I use for the tail. Alright guys, so this here in my hand now is a 1x19 size 5/64. 1x19 means that there are 19 single strands of cable or wire twisted together to form the one strand you see here. It's a pretty stiff kind of cable. It's not near as forgiving, but it is a lot tougher cable than the 7x7. Now I like to use the 5/64 for my loop of my snare, because believe it or not, the smaller diameter of cable that you use, the less damage you'll have on the fur and on the leather. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you really stop and think about it, it does, because you don't have as much surface area across that fur and across that leather as what you do with a bigger cable. So it does make perfect sense. But anyway, this is really stiff, really tough, really fast when you load it, and we'll go through that too. We'll go through loading the snare. I've gone through that in some other videos on further back if you'd like to check those out, but we're going to go through the whole thing today. So yeah, this cable is really fast when you load it. Some guys say it's entirely too sensitive. I say that a lot of that has to do with the fact that they don't know what they don't know. Not trying to call anybody out, not trying to be a horse's ass about it, just that's a fact. Once you get to playing with this and once you get onto it and get it figured out, you'll see then exactly what I'm talking about. It's not something that I can just explain to you. You've got to figure some of this out on your own. But anyway, back to what I was saying, I like to use this for my loop. Makes a heck of a good loop for a snare. And I use this on everything: coon, beaver, coyotes. Doesn't matter. This is the cable. These are the two cables I use. So anyway, let's get some things set up here and let's build a snare. There's one more very important piece of equipment that I forgot to mention, and that is a good pair of cable cutters. Now you can cut them with side cutters, you can cut it with a pair of dikes, but I'm telling you, once you get you a good pair of cable cutters, you won't go back to using anything else. For what these cost, in my opinion, they are relatively cheap. A good pair is going to cost you upwards of 70 to 80 bucks a pair. Now you can find them cheaper. You can, you know, and they'll get, and you can get by just fine. But if you're going to be cutting a lot of cable, I mean miles of it, you're better off to spend the money, get the very best that you can afford at the time, and make an investment in a good pair of cable cutters. They're just another tool. That's the way I look at them. I go through one pair of them about every 4 or 5 years. They're junk. They won't cut cable anymore. I just throw them away and I go buy another pair. You figure out, you know, $80. Let's just say for easy figuring, $80. You know, over a 5-year period. That's pretty cheap, if you know, especially when you're cutting as much cable as what you are. So anyway, take the time, take the money, invest in a good pair of cable cutters. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier. It's going to save you a whole lot of headaches in the long run. Alright, so let's get started building a snare. The first thing we're going to do is cut our tail of our snare. Now what we're going to make today is a beaver / coyote combination snare. So we start with our 3/32 7x7 cable and a ruler tape measure of some kind. Now I like to cut my tails 7 feet. I like a 10-foot snare on beaver. A 10-foot snare is just a good all-around average size length on coyotes. Works fine in a fence, works fine out in the middle of a trail somewhere, or a set of tire tracks, something of that sort. So a good 10-foot snare is just a good all-around length to use on beaver and coyotes both. So we'll start off here and we'll get our cable measured here. Like I said, I want 7 feet of cable here. All right, there's 4 foot. And we'll go another 3 here. And if you can, I'm doing this on my front porch, but if you can do it in your shop where you can set up, put your cable on a roller, so all you have to do is just pull it off, it works a whole lot easier, I promise. So anyway, that's enough of that. We'll get our cable cut here, we'll get our cable cutters, and just squeeze the handles, and we've got our cable cut, and it's nice and square on the ends. That's very important. So there's our 7 foot for our tail. Now we take our 1x19 5/64 for the loop, and it usually takes roughly 3 foot of cable, if I remember right. It's been a while. But 3 foot of cable should yield a I think a 10-inch loop, if I recall right, 9 or 10. 9 inches is plenty adequate, plenty. And the way you measure that is, you know, across. So you always want to allow yourself a little extra to bend over for your lock, and allow yourself a little extra on the tag or on the tail end of it here for your swivel and your whammy. Okay, so there's a 10-inch loop right there, just exactly 10 inches across. I don't know how well you're going to see that, but I'll show you. Inside to inside, you are, yeah, roughly, yeah, you're right there. You're right there to 10 inches. Okay, so by the time we're done, we're actually going to end up somewhere around that 9.5 inch loop. So again, we take our cable cutters, mark it with our fingers, and we cut it off. Now by the time I'm said and done, I've got roughly an hour in a dozen snares. So, you know, you take a couple hours in the evening, and that's cutting the cable, putting them together. You know, you've got an hour invested. You take a couple hours in the evening when you get home, you're off work, whatever it is, you know, that you do. Sit down, cut you up 2 dozen tails and 2 dozen loops. put them together. You know, you do that 10 times, 10 times a month. Doesn't take long. You've got 20 dozen snares made up in a hurry, and you didn't kill yourself doing it. Okay, so the next thing you're going to need is some ferrules and a lock. And then you're going to need some way to attach these ferrules to your cable. Now there are swaggers out there, bench swaggers that you can buy, or it's just you mount it to a workbench, put your pieces together, slide it into the notch, pull the handle down, it crimps them on there, okay? I don't like those. I don't trust them. They wear out, and you don't realize they've worn out until you realize they've worn out the hard way. So my preferred method is a piece of railroad iron and a hammer, and just hammer them on. I've got a 3-pound hammer here. I got my railroad iron, and that's just the way I do it. So the first thing you want to do, which is very important, slide one end of your cable through your ferrule. Then you slide the lock on through the big opening, like so. Bend it back around itself and push it through the other end of your ferrule, like so. Then you pull it down just as tight and as far as you can, okay? And you take your hammer and you smash that ferrule shut. Now you take your loose end of your cable and you run it through the other end of your lock, like so, and test it that it's going to slide, and now you know that you've got that loop built right. Alright, now the next thing you do is get yourself a support collar, and in this case we're going to use a little piece of tubing like we showed there earlier in the video, and you just slide it over onto your cable just like so. And then you take a swivel and again you run one end of the cable through the ferrule, run one end of it through, or the end of it through one end of your swivel. Then you run the other end of the cable through the other side of the ferrule, just like we did with the lock, and you pull it all down tight again, just like that. And you take your hammer, and you hammer that ferrule shut. Now you've got your swivel attached, just like so. Again, fire the snare, just because you want to make sure that everything's working like it should. Now you take your tail of your snare that you cut, you get yourself another 2 ferrules, and again you put one end through one side, put the swivel on, run it around back by itself again through the other side of the ferrule, pull it down tight. Take your hammer, mash it shut. Now here's where you have a decision to make. You can either put a loop on this end of this snare, which is what I do because I don't feel that the end swivel does a bit of good, or you can take a stake swivel like so and put it on here, and then just put one of the single ferrules on the end here, so that you have a swivel here plus a swivel in the middle. Personally, myself, I don't feel that this end swivel does a nickel's worth of good, because if he happens to wrap up between here and your center swivel, that's the only thing you got working for you is that center swivel anyway. So what good was this extra cost of this? not a thing. It doesn't do you a nickel's worth of good. So we're just gonna build them the way I build them. You can decide to do that if you choose to. I just put a loop in the end of it, pull it down to where it's about a 1/2 inch here, or I can get a stake through there if I wanted to, or I can feed my disposable through it, or I can, you know, go around a tree with it, or whatever I want to do. I've got enough of a loop here to do that with. So anyway, we pull it on down. Again, just take your hammer, mash her shut. All right, guys, we have an almost completed snare for beaver and coyotes. The only thing left to do is load the loop, and we'll have to step out and I will show y'all how to do that. All right, guys, now since we're not in the shop today, I don't have my vise and I don't have my regular piece of pipe that I use to load these on. We're just going to do it right here off the ball of the truck. You can do this out in the field if you need to. And the reason we load these snares, and I'll show you, you can see how slow that thing falls, and you can see that it doesn't close all the way. Now, 1x19 cable doesn't do that anyway. It's just too stiff and it does not close all the way. But by loading it, and you want to make sure that your cable is laying flat as flat can be, and you just barely pull it around the pipe like that. And you do the other side too, just like so. Now we've formed a more perfect circle. All right? And then watch this snare fire now. See how much faster that is? It takes a while to come around. It takes a while to come around this part, but once this comes around, once the lock moves past here, then it's just like being on a roller coaster. It's boom, all at once, and it's gone. So again, I'll fire this thing so you can see how much faster that is. That's the difference between a loaded snare and an unloaded snare. You want to load them, and you can do the same thing with 7x7 cable as you do with 5/64. It works the same. All right, gang, so there it is, the whole ball of wax to building a snare. It's not hard, it's not rocket science, it's just making sure you get all your pieces in order, in the right order. That's all there is to it. Guys, I sure appreciate everything you've done for my channel, especially here lately with all the new subscribers. Man, I can't be any happier, and I can't thank y'all enough. For those of you that haven't yet, though, if you would please hit that subscribe button for me, hit that thumbs up, hit that notification bell. I surely do appreciate it. Want to remind everybody that June, I got to get the dates right here, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, I'll be in Jefferson, Wisconsin at the National Fur Takers Convention. If you happen to be in the area and you have to be at the convention, please stop by and say hi and introduce yourself to me. I'd love nothing more than to meet y'all. Guys, again, this is Dale Billingsley with another one. Signing out.